images of glory in my mind at enlistment. Overhead a flapping red, white, and blue, filling the distance. A grand divide between myself and conscientious convictions or belief systems that stop people from killing over religion. I was young, and I was out of options in my mind. It was supposed to be fun, my obligations ill-defined. I'd be the one to take charge with a gun back in my mind. Without college or riches, no dreams to realize. Well, I never have the ladder, the Marines to get me to first. Ain't nothing better than dressed blues and the one spitting this verse. You see the world paying to the GI Bill, fat in the purse. My recruiter made it sound simple, a play get well rehearsed. Forever cursed to the ones who get young innocent signatures under the guise of a God country that honor diminishes. Greed built a standing army when against the founders' wishes. Now free democracy conducts war games and peacekeeping missions. Ironic hypocrisy.
Fallen tears, raindrops from your eyes. Fallen rain, let it fall.
I scored high in my entrance exams on ASVAB and chose the 0341 with guaranteed Hawaii track. Graduated basic, now MOS school's where I'm at. A mortar man with a 35-pound gun on my back. Plus my rifle 8 pounds and 65-pound pack. I'm 18, weigh a $195 and feel jack. 108 pounds on my back, a boot marine and Cadillacs. A short 20-mile hump, 4 quarts in my flat. After 7 miles, swearing in my right foot crack. I'm an E1, tell my sergeant I think it snapped. He's an E5, shouts profit, don't feed me crap. You got 2 feet, compensate and don't fall back. After 4 more miles, my left foot joins in the act. Only 9 more to go, I walked them all, that's a fact. 1 certificate for intestinal fortitude, not having shat. And 3 months healing, lost Hawaii to Guantanamo, rap.
Sergeant Davey Trois who I met in 6th grade. Dress greens, patent leather, and a high top fade. My mind was made up, I couldn't wait to grow up so I could sign up, man up, and stop the corrupt. A champion for God and country. Just wait till they get a load of me, an unstoppable PFC. Private first class, polished brass. I wanted to kill all the black pajamas that were hiding in the grass. But with no war in sight, my plight to fight never took flight. So I trained during the day and got drunk at night. Set my sights on all types of glory. Fast forward to Afghanistan, totally different story. IEDs, enemies, no front line to seize. 80 pounds of gear in the desert, I could hardly breathe. Blood-stained fatigues, very many colleagues sent home to the VA to live with PTSD. Everyday recruiters go to inner cities and ask for
fallen tears, raindrops from your eyes. Fallen rain, let it fall.
I never let my children volunteer for the military to make the same mistakes as I did these days could be deadly. If they're drafted with Dodgers, my go back, stay ready. I support Manning and Snowden. You know where this country's heading. Global tyrant, hegemonic, bully police force, demonic practice, virgin sacrifice, bloodlust. All your wars valuing corporations over people. Vampire. This is sick worship by objects and pure evil. Material desires get more attention than spiritual. Benefits are based on profits, complaints aren't given view. Arms manufacture, supply both sides of conflicts. Do you have a problem with any of these statements or doubt their truth? I'm a father and a veteran, and I stand for peace. Julian Assange against our commanders-in-chief. But it's hard to be better when daily demands compete. I'm not ignoring the slaughter, I'm just trying to eat like you.
Fallen tears, raindrops from your eyes. Fallen rain, let it fall.
Good afternoon. It is good to be on with y'all. I'm glad that we have folks joining us. real quick, grab the link, share it, and let's bring some people in this conversation. Today's convo is one that we've wanted to have for months. Really wanted to, have a youth-led discussion around what's happening on the ground. We talk a lot about grassroots organizing and following the lead of those who are leading. So today we're excited to have young people on who are in Chicago making things happen, quite honestly. So again, grab the link, please share it on your page and your with your followers, and engage and invite them to come in the conversation today. Please feel free to use the chat, drop questions, be respectful, because these are young people who are leading the work. If you don't understand, ask questions. So again, really excited for y'all to be on with us. Looking forward to our great talk. My name is Natasha, Air Force veteran. After high school, I went on to enlist in the Air Force on a 4-year plan, and somehow that 4 turned into 20 years, and I retired after 20 in 2016. When I did so, a bunch of stuff started coming up for me, particularly how I had participated in this apparatus, really imperialism abroad and at home, that has contributed to the militarization of police departments, particularly the one in my own hometown of Chicago, which has a legacy of, constitutional violations and quite honestly, murder and entrapment. And so when we see these, police officers in our city streets with militarized gear, that, quite honestly remind me of any special operations unit in the military, ready for battle, it really does sort of stick with me that there's a direct connection between my military experience. And so I'm really happy to be on with my co-host today. Mike, want to do a brief introduction, Mike?
Yeah, Natasha, thanks for the intro. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike James. I've been doing the show Stand Down Here with Natasha and Miles Megacyph for a little over a year now. It's been a great project. By the grace of God, we've been able to keep it going just about every week. Between the three of us, I don't think we've missed a week in over a year. So this has been a lot of fun. We've had big numbers and be able to contact veterans, and a lot of people have seen the show. So it feels good to be doing it, and glad to be here today. A little bit about me. I'm a Navy veteran. I was I was an enlisted person who worked in public affairs or mass communications. So I had a weird Navy career. I never served a day on a ship. I ended up serving about 7 months on the ground in Iraq as a photographer, and I served a little over a year in Afghanistan as a photographer. And I saw the workings of empire and the military-industrial complex firsthand, and spent a lot of time documenting it. And then, after leaving the military, I had the opportunity to be able to look at all that work and really mellow on it and meditated on it. My cat's in the background there. That's hilarious. So, with all that introspection and all that physical evidence of what I witnessed, it affected me deeply. And it brought me to the conclusion, finally, that, what I was doing was wrong. I was on the wrong side of the camera there, or the wrong side of the gun. And I felt a lot of guilt and grief about that. It took me many years to kind of come to terms with it. And so, part of me doing this show is part of, me applying my theory and applying my consciousness. So, it's a lot of fun, and we've got a really great show here today. We're going to talk to some young people. I think part of my own personal philosophy, political theory, is that we have to listen to people. I have to spend a lot of time listening to people and figure out what's going on, what their experience with the world is, and allow them to guide you. I think that the leaders, you have to develop a system where the leaders become the led and the led become the leaders. And so that's what we're doing, is giving a voice to young people to talk about their experience dealing with the police state, the surveillance state in their schools, where obviously these institutions should not be. We want to do everything we can to eradicate police. I personally believe in the abolishment of all police. And I also understand that there has to be a system. You can't just abolish the police overnight, but we have to build a society where the police are no longer needed. And we do that through unity and solidarity and understanding, and a lot of hard work, a lot of organizing and activism. So yeah, so that's kind of my improvisational thoughts about what's going on the show today. We've got some guests here.
Yeah, we are. One of the things that I think is super critically important, like, why to stand down. We talk about this every week, but when we have new viewers, I think it's always important for us to talk about. We started this show after we saw the National Guard being deployed to cities and neighborhoods across the map, starting with Minneapolis, right? After the murder of George Floyd and the murder surrounding them, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and Rashad Brooks down in Atlanta. So Stand Down was really the Veteran for Peace tagline, but really we submitted strongly worded letters to decision makers, and really a plea to the troops to say, stand down, don't take arms, and don't raise your weapons against your neighbors. And so this webinar is really a reflection of that. It's not lost on us that the George Floyd purpose of why we really started this, that the trial is underway for the former police officer who placed his knee on George's neck for nearly 9 minutes and snuffing out his life. So we're also monitoring that. And we did say that, we'll be having a conversation as this trial, a lengthy trial is what it's expected to be. We'll be talking about that in the coming weeks. So again, here's this conversation we're having today around, the threat of police not keeping us safe. And we really want to dispel a lot of the myths in terms of what that life experience is like for directly impacted folks. So that's why we thought that it is no greater time than to have young leaders on with us. So I'm excited to bring on Raina and Catlin. So I'm going to add you all in here and really just say welcome and thank you. Thank you for making time, for being on with us today. I know there's a lot going on in your city, and there's so many places that you could be, but to have you here in this space really does mean a lot. So thank you. And I'm looking forward to listening and learning to y'all. So I think what Mike and I will do today is sort of just let y'all have I won't say let y'all have the floor. Please take the floor. And then we'll come back on shortly and have some conversation, just some questions to see how we can support and where y'all are from there. Is that cool? Okay, so I will say the floor is yours, please.
Hi guys, my name is Raina. I am a youth activist. Oh God, they're leaving quick. Okay, I'm a youth activist from Good Kids Mad City, Tri-Student Pandemic Response, and Pilsen Alliance.
Hi, my name is Caitlin, and I organized with Sunrise Shy and some other youth organizations as well.
In this discussion, we wanted to talk about the over-policing or the policing period within our schooling and within our neighborhoods. Kaylin, if you would like to take the floor first and talk about how you are dealing with your police being in your school.
Yeah, so I think the main thing is that we don't really have the alternatives to policing throughout schools. So I would say psychiatrists, nurses, social workers, the things that we actually do need in our schools, we don't have. And alternatives to those, we have SROs and police officers and security. um I think as like the mental health and like the health of students, specifically black and brown students in this case, we don't have those in the schools that we do need them. And I think that a lot of times people would rather talk about why we do need police in schools, but nobody's talking about what would prevent police from being in schools in the first place. I think we like to talk a lot about how like kids' behaviors and what kids would do that would allow police to be in schools. But if we had those psychiatrists and social workers and counselors that would actually be addressing these issues, that would actually stop and dismantle these issues, we wouldn't need police anyway. And just talking about policing in schools, policing doesn't even work in our communities. So when you bring it into a building with a bunch of kids who are like still learning and growing at that point, it's absurd and it's disgusting.
I completely agree. Like that is 100% correct. I for one am a high schooler in the southwest side of Chicago. So in my high school, we do have police as security guards, and of course, like everybody wants to talk about, like Caitlin said, everyone wants to talk about why we need police in schools, but why don't we talk about how we can prevent police coming to our schools? Like mental health resources for one should be a big part of our schools. These schools are located in the southwest side of Chicago, which is majority of the places where kids can convert the most trauma. So with all this trauma and all this anger that is built up within you, and you're going back to school with all that trauma, with all that anger, and then you have these polices who are oppressing you inside the schools that you are supposed to learn, that you are supposed to grow, and that you're supposed to flourish, and they're oppressing you. What they're doing is not helping you. They're not helping you whatsoever. These polices are treating you as criminals before you can even show them who you really are. They're oppressing our children from elementary schools to high schools, treating us like criminals before we can even take a breath within their school. They oppress us outside in our neighborhoods as our neighborhoods are flooded with pigs. And then right then again, we go back into our schools and they're flooded again. You want to protect us or you want to oppress us? You're preparing us for the future or are you preparing us for jail? Because that's sure as hell how it feels like it.
Yeah, definitely. That's some truth right there. I think going back to where like we don't allow kids to breathe, I think the dehumanization of black and brown kids is real, especially in the city of Chicago. Something that I also want to bring up is how do you expect for black and brown kids to feel safe in the presence of the same people who I don't even see police officers as people, if we're being honest, because you're working for a system that is continuously oppressing our people. Um, but literally CPD killed a 13-year-old boy out in our neighborhoods. And then you put those same police officers in our schools? That doesn't even make sense to me. And the thing that really makes me angered the most is that like everyone sees it as a form of like safety. But I'm trying to figure like what is so safe about having police in schools? And another thing that you were talking about, like the trauma, we don't we I think we as a society do not really address the trauma within black and brown people as a whole. And I think it's like these ongoing cycles, and it's a cycle in different forms, like you were saying, how kids kind of bring that into schools. It's seen in our neighborhoods, in our communities, as well as in our families, where that trauma is continuously passed down and it's not addressed because, and then at that point, trauma just creates more trauma. Unaddressed trauma just creates more trauma. And when we allow that trauma to just surpass and continuously be passed through generations of people, and then you're saying, well, this is why we need police in schools, but you're not even trying to address it with these mental health outlets, with these people who can actually address that trauma rather than acting upon it.
I am so glad you brought up that 13-year-old. His name, and I want y'all to say his name. His name is Adam Toledo. He is a 13-year-old from Little Village who was shot and killed in the arms of the people who are sworn in to serve and protect. But we want to understand, who are they protecting? Who are they serving? Because it sure as hell ain't the black and brown community. Who they're protecting is the killers within their own department. They are not protecting us. They're protecting their killers. They're protecting the fucking murderers inside their own department. They're not protecting us. Adam Toledo was a 13-year-old. And I am tired, I am sick and tired of having people bash his mother, bash his name, saying things like, oh, well, he was a game banger. Baby, why is it that so many of these killings are happening within the Black and brown community? Instead of asking ourselves, like, what was this 13-year-old doing at 12 o'clock in the morning? Why don't we ask, well, how did this 13-year-old, how did this baby go into this lifestyle? How did they ended up here? What did we do? What did the communities do to fail this child? What did the system do to fail this child? May I remind you, this baby was 13 years old. 13 years when he was shot and killed. Why don't we ask, well, what could we do better for the next ones? Why is it that all of these gang violence, all of the killings that are happening within our community are always in the communities that are stripped of any resources, that are stripped of any access to resources, that are stripped of any assistance? Well, the North Side schools have the most assistance and yet have the less violence. But the low-income schools, the low-income neighborhoods are the ones facing the most trauma and the ones that are getting the most over-policed. Why don't we ask ourselves, or why don't we fund resources for these communities? Instead of taking it from us, instead of pointing fingers of who to blame, and instead of oppressing us, help us fund programs for our kids, community centers for our youth, instead of telling us that it's our fault that we're dying.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody wants to talk about, it's just so frustrating because I'm 13. I'm a Black girl and I'm 13. And seeing that happened and hearing people talk about that too. I think it's just super important to talk about gang culture and how people bring that up, because everybody wants to talk about it, but nobody wants to address it properly at that. Because gangs are, it's not even about that. It's not about how someone lived their life. It doesn't matter if somebody was a criminal, if somebody did whatever. That doesn't mean that they deserve to die. Nobody deserves to die, especially when it's in the hands of police. Everyone is pointing fingers at everybody, but the people who are actually in the streets continuously killing Black and brown folks. It's so crazy how everyone wants to talk about the trauma that we're all going through, but nobody wants to address it. No one wants to be like, hey, here's these outlets. Hey, we're going to do this for the youth. Hey, we're going to do this for the parents. We're going to create these systems that are going to actually work. Nobody wants to do that. We're just going to talk about the faults, and we're going to blame it on us when really it's the system that's continuously putting us in these situations. And it honestly just feels like a setup. And they're constantly talking about the current place of these systems, but they're not doing anything about it.
I would just like to remind y'all that cops are not God. They don't get to choose whether a person lives nor dies. Cops are supposed to arrest, not murder, not cover up these stories, not choose whether this life was innocent or not. They don't get to do that. They are not nobody to choose what a 13-year-old, whether a 13-year-old was a bad person or not. Because one, you guys are, oh, I hate people who try to justify a killing when it comes to a cop and the youth and our Black and brown youth. Because you guys are quick to say, oh, well, he was a game banger. What about Breonna Taylor? She was sleeping. What happened to her? What about George Floyd? He was walking in his neighborhoods. What happened there? What happened to Laquan McDonald? What happened to all of these killings of Black and brown youth that did nothing and were shot and killed by the arms of police? Our neighborhoods are over policed, and you want to police them more and within our schools? You want the same cops that oppress us outside of schools, that kill us outside of schools, the same people who wear that same badge, that killed our neighbors, that killed our family members, that killed our friends inside the schools to protect us? Who are they protecting? Please tell me, who are they protecting? Because they protect property. They don't protect the black and brown youth. You see them down in Chicago, downtown in Chicago, protecting the stores, protecting all of around there, but you don't see them protecting the Black and brown youth, the Black and brown communities. You see them oppressing them, arresting them, harassing them, but you don't ever see them protecting us. You don't ever see them asking us, are we good? What do we need? Never.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really good point to bring up. We see cops the same cops that are in Beverly and Mount Greenwood and the white folks neighborhoods are not the same cops that they put in the streets in black and brown neighborhoods. And I think it's super important to bring that up. When people try to compare and try to bring up how oh well these neighborhoods are policed too. You don't see any problems in these neighborhoods. That's because you're not black and brown. You these cops are not meant to oppress you. They're not meant to harass you. They're not meant to put constant trauma on you. And I think it's super important to talk about how just bringing that kind of trauma into these schools. And when kids are telling you, hey, I don't feel safe around police officers, but if you want me to go talk to a counselor, I can do that. That's the alternative. That's what we're saying. We're saying, hey, we don't feel safe with these cops in our schools. I don't feel safe with the same oppressors who killed 13-year-old Adam to be in my school. I don't feel safe with that. And if you want to objectify to that, that makes you look dumb. That doesn't make me look dumb, because I'm saying that I don't feel safe in this environment with these cops. I'm not saying anything else but, hey, why don't we put social workers in these schools? Why don't we put psychiatrists in these schools? Why don't we put actual outlets and actual resources and people who will actually tend to these issues continuously and properly at that? Because cops do not address anything properly, and they never will, they never have, and they weren't established to.
I would just like to add on to that, because that was a really great point. And honestly, with that, we have to go back to history with policing. We have to go back to history of the system, because if you really look into the history, cops were made by white people for white people. The system was made by white people for white people. It wasn't made for the black and brown youth. So when we say abolish that damn system, we mean abolish. We mean take it out, because it wasn't meant for us. It wasn't meant for the people of color. It was meant for the white supremacists. It was meant for the rich. It was meant for people that are white. It was never meant for the black and brown youth. So for putting a system, for in placing a system and cops that weren't meant for these people, of course they're going to oppress us. Of course, the reaction with these cops, with black and brown people, will be different from the reaction with white people, because it was made for y'all. It wasn't made for us. By saying things like just cooperate with the police. There's been many cases where black and brown youth have cooperated with police and have still been shot and killed. May I remind you, these polices are supposed to arrest and not murder. How are you going to justify murder? Any murderer should go to jail. Any murderer should have their life taken from them. Not like taken from them to the point where they're dead, but taken from them for the point that they take accountability. Because when it comes to police, you don't want them to take accountability. You say things like, well, they're doing their job. Their job is to arrest, not to murder. By saying things, well, the youth needs to take accountability too. We're trying, but we're getting killed doing so. By putting resources within our communities, we wouldn't need police. Putting mental health counselors, having people to talk to about their trauma, because these kids are going through so much trauma that builds up into anger. These are children. These are children who are product to their own environment, that same environment that white people, that people in power, underfund, strip from any resources, and strip from any assistance. What do you think they're gonna, if you are treating us like criminals our whole lives, what do you expect from us other than to turn into criminals?
That's truth right there. And honestly, I'm going to go back to the point where you're talking about accountability, because the thing is that we don't even hold these police officers accountable for what they're doing. They are not held to the expectations. They kill minorities and they get away with it. So it's not even where it's like balanced out. It's not even where these police officers are in these schools and being held accountable for their actions as well as youth is. And I think another thing is that dehumanization of black and brown youth is real, because black and brown kids do not get to be kids. I think there's a way that the world sees us where we are grown. we don't get to be kids. We don't get to make mistakes. We don't get to do anything. And we're constantly being told, you should have did this. You should have done that. You should have been this. You should have been that. And it's like, I'm a kid. Kids are supposed to make mistakes. That's what being a kid and being youth and being a teenager, that's all about. And I think that it's when you're trying to hold youth accountable, but you can't even hold these grown people who work for this system that marginalizes us. You can't even hold them accountable. And I don't expect them to, because like you were saying, going back to that the establishment of police officers were never established to be held accountable because they were patty rollers. That's exactly how I see police officers, and that's exactly how I see them when they're in our schools, as patty rollers, because the same police officers who are out in our streets were the same ones who were in the fields of my ancestors. And you can't tell me anything different. It's a pipeline, and they were never meant to be held accountable for their actions, and that's exactly why they're getting away with this now. They were never meant to get fired or just be held accountable for what they're doing. They weren't meant to do that. They were meant to murder us. They were meant to harass us. They were meant to oppress us and marginalize us and get away with it. That was the whole idea of being a patty roller. That was the whole idea of creating this system that would marginalize the Black and brown people and then give power to these white people and put white people in those positions of power. And I think it's crazy when we talk about these kids, like, people should be cooperating with the police and people should have done this and done that, and you're expecting us to do all this. We're humans, we make mistakes, but murder, people killing a 13-year-old, that's not a mistake. That's purposely, especially when we have continuously seen police officers do this and then therefore get away with it.
I completely agree when you said that the Black and brown youth are looked upon as adults. That right there is 100% truth. Because when we look at white folks, when the media looks at white folks and they make a mistake, oh, they're kids, they don't know any better, they'll grow, blah, blah, blah. But when it's a Black and brown person, oh, thugs, straight thugs, you got one thug off the streets. Like, why is it that our Black and brown youth can't be kids? Why is it that when we slip up and make a mistake, we're right away thugs, we're right away hood rats, we're right away this, we're right away animals, savages? But when a white person does it, oh, they're kids, they don't know any better, they're gonna grow. Why can't my people grow? Why can't our Black and brown people grow? Why are you killing us? Why can't we grow? Why can't we make mistakes? By justifying a murder for a child, you look ridiculous. You look embarrassing trying to justify a murder between a child. And for that same officer that killed Adam Toledo was put in timeout. He was put in timeout by doing desk duty. Not in jail, not going to trial, not being shut down, not being fired. No, he went to desk duty. He was put in timeout like a child, the same child that Adam was. They treated the cop officer like a child, but wouldn't look at Adam Toledo, a 13-year-old baby, as a child. Instead, they looked at him as a thug. They never looked at him like, what was his lifestyle? What was the place that he grew up in? Why is it that our kids who are coming from low income neighborhoods are turning out and like this? Why don't we fund resources instead of trying to point fingers and look at somebody to blame? There is nobody to blame but the system that Adam Toledo, that Breonna Taylor, that George Floyd, that Laquan McDonald, all of us that were born into. That same system that was never made for us, the same system oppresses us and oppresses our people. The same system that incarcerates us and enjails us into the system that was never made for us. Police do nothing but arrest the Black and brown youth, even if something we didn't do. They still arrest us because at the end of the day, we're still criminals in their eyes. Because when we walk into a courtroom, innocent until proven guilty doesn't apply to us because our skin color already said what we did, even if we did do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think everybody's so quick to criticize what Adam did. Well, Adam was a 13-year-old boy. I'm a 13-year-old. I know what like 13-year-olds are goofy, we're fun, we're teenagers, we're living life, we make mistakes. And I think that everybody's so quick to criticize what he may or may have not done. Um, but no, I don't see anybody preventing that from any other black or brown youth that might have been close with Adam or gone to school with Adam or lived in that same community, a little village. Nobody's trying to help out with the, like, is it who other than community and organizations who organize to help each other and black and brown youth? Nobody, as I would say, people in power aren't doing anything to provide support. It's us out here in these streets. It's us out here protesting. It's us out here fighting to get these police out of schools. It's us fighting to defund CPD, trying to fund these social programs, trying to fund youth, trying to fund these mental health outlets. That's us. That's black and brown youth. That's black and brown people. Nobody else is trying to do that but us. You don't see Lori Lightfoot getting out there and even trying. She's not even like people in fact, Lori Lightfoot, she's not even trying to do anything. And what makes me sick is that she pointed more fingers at what she said, the person that put the gun in Adam's hands, rather than the person that had the gun and killed Adam. Like that's sick to me. She couldn't even she can't, like, if I can't even look her in the eyes, that's how disgusting that is. You're so quick to criticize what that person may have done, but you're not criticizing the person that killed Adam. You're not criticizing the system that continuously marginalizes us. And what even makes me more sick is that Lori Lightfoot out her mouth said that she was with the police officers. So you're rolling with the same people who killed a 13-year-old boy. You're not even trying. You're saying these things out your mouth, and you're acting in these certain ways, and it's like people in positions of power don't even care, because they don't, obviously. But what are they trying to do for black and brown youth? They're not even trying to push for these certain programs to be available to black and brown youth.
I 100% agree with that. And honestly, with all, nah, I ain't even finna respect her. What Lori Pigfoot does is oppress the same black and brown youth that she went into mayor trying to say that I will protect and I will do the best I can to help. Lori don't do shit for us. She don't do nothing for us. Lori, first of all, in the 13-year-old, what happened? There was never an actual article that said that Adam had the gun. It said that a gun was found on the scene. So why is Lori Pigfoot so quick to judge and so quick to criticize? Oh, what was this 13-year-old doing with a gun? Where did it say it was with the gun? Where was the gun? Why don't you tell your little pigs to step out with the footage of what really happened? Because Lori Pigfoot wasn't never working for us. She was working for the white people, the same white people that kiss her ass and pay her. That's it. She ain't working for us. That's why it's always gonna be defund CPD and get Lori out of office. That's it.
Man, y'all said a mouthful. Like, thank you for, just really sharing your stories. And it's not even a story, your testimony, your lived experience. So to hear you talk about the connection between the police officers that are labeled school resource officers are the same cops that are in the streets, everything that y'all explained. I don't even, need to repeat it. Like, that was deep. And I like that you all were vulnerable in the way that you really just told your story, but then also what you see happening around you. Like, I know this is, so recent. Adam was murdered by Chicago Police Department. I believe it was last Monday. So he is a local 7th grader on the south, or would you say west side of Chicago, a 7th grader with special needs, who was shot and killed behind his neighborhood high school. So a school that he would have matriculated to in 2 years is where he was gunned down by CPD. The city is refusing at this point to release the body cam footage. Not that the people need that trauma, but it is just, it's almost twisted, but to sort of again prove, just like with Laquan McDonald, Rakia Boyd and so many other names like Ronnie Man, like all these local, names and experiences that we hear about, is that the people want to again prove that the system does not, and police officers do not keep them safe. And unfortunately, because we rarely hear the truth, the body cam footage is the only reliance around, again, saying, although it's traumatic, we told you. And we're asking for something else. This is also happening at the time when our mayor is refusing to reopen the mental health clinics that were closed across our city. And amid COVID-19, we're really seeing a huge uptick. Shout out to Mike with the solo spotlight. But when we're seeing a huge
I was trying to spotlight you. I'm sorry.
Okay, we're good. But when we're also seeing, cool, it's all good, Mike. We're good. We're good. But we're seeing there's a need amid COVID-19. There's so much, there's so much to be said here. And so to hear you all quickly go from, this is the experience in schools, that these cops do not keep us safe. They police us. The militarized presence of authority with guns in our school is traumatizing in and of itself. And then when we aren't in school, this is what they're doing in our backyard. Like, it's a lot. I appreciate y'all for connecting that and really honing in on the point that the mayor of Chicago enjoys national fanfare, when here locally, we can't put our finger on why. Categorically, she spent overwhelming, I think it's 60% of our CARES Act money on police. And only a fraction of it on social services that are dire in our community. So that's what the frustration that y'all have is, pain and heaviness in my heart, right? Like, this isn't working and we need something to change now. So police-free schools is a logical next step in a city like ours with the legacy of policing that we have. Mike, you got any questions? Like, jump in here. What's on your heart?
Well, I'm thinking about my experience in public schools in Cincinnati, where we had a large Black and brown presence, and it seems obvious that even when I graduated in the '90s, that police and military recruiters were a very much everyday part of school back then, and it infects people's brains. It's part of the white supremacist exceptionalism, American exceptionalism, that infected my brain for a time. That's why I joined the military, because I was poisoned by it. And most people are, even a lot of veterans, even veterans within Veterans for Peace, are still have elements of that poison in their brains. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of self-reflection and self-critique to wash that out of our heads. And so it's really great to hear that young people now are so aware of it. They see it exactly for what it is. They've grown up with it. They have this very personal experience, and I'm really appreciative of your expertise and your charisma in being able to speak about this, Raina and Catlin. Thank you so much for putting it in such clear terms. I think you're absolutely correct in your analysis. Your experience is valid, and we appreciate it. I think it's really good to be able to platform it here within Veterans for Peace. But I was just kind of curious if you have any kind of personal experience that any interactions with police that kind of rubbed you the wrong way. If there's anything, on a daily basis, or any specific experiences that you have to share about cops within the Chicago school system. Either Catlin or Raina, if you have anything to talk about your personal experiences with cops.
I personally do. I was going to this one high school that I transferred because of that situation. So in this school, somebody made a rumor that I had legal substance in my locker, and when I'd never done any of that, and when they were searching my locker, I told them like, you can't do that. That's my personal stuff, like searching through all of my stuff. And when I tried to grab my stuff or to try to like push my locker, they threw me against the locker, and with that, like they threw me hard enough that I honestly I dislocated my shoulder a bit. And with that, like I just started breaking down, like crying, and they were like laughing at me. Like they were like making it seem like I was being dramatic when I was genuinely hurt. Like my stuff were thrown on the phone, my stuff were thrown on the floor. All my stuff, all my personal feminine products were out in the open. Everybody was looking at me. Like I felt embarrassed. I felt like horrible. My shoulder was hurting, first of all. My whole body was aching. Like I just started crying, and I couldn't believe what was going on, because like I always seen this police officer in my schools, and I had an encounter with him until that day, because I always stepped away from police. I always try to take the opposite route, do my own. But it's to the point where they were so quick to search my locker without me knowing. It took me having my friend tell me what was going on, and for me to ask for a bathroom pass, for me to find out that they are searching my stuff, my feminine product, my gym clothes, everything that was in my locker. They searched, and to the point where they pushed me, and I hurt my shoulder. I had to go to the emergency room to get it relocated back in. Like it was horrible. And that right in itself, like I still can't believe that they happened now. Like that's just incredible.
Me personally, I don't like having any encounterment with police officers. Honestly, even just seeing them outside in our communities, I might side eye them and then I'll just walk away. I really can't deal with just thinking about their presence and how they're being present in our schools and in our streets. So I really just try to keep out of my way, even if there is something.
That's a good, I mean, the way you put that is so real. And that's a consistent, like, we just, we're in community. We've had workshops where we're talking about this and how we want to reimagine safety in Chicago public schools because it's mandatory. And we're getting tired of waiting for that for our children and young adults to feel safe in their hallways. Schools should be a safe haven. So when I repeatedly hear you all say that you do things like take other stairwells um, to avoid even interacting because you don't want any interaction with police, like that level, that's trauma in and of itself. And so when I hear y'all talk about that, every time I hear it, that's the mandate that we have to, get more counselors and therapists. In our city, we have a lot of community folks that have a lot of experience with conflict resolution, right? That could be in our schools when they reopen safely, amid COVID, the health pandemic. But I'm curious to hear, like, when does your administrators and teachers, do y'all talk about this and let them know how you feel? And I'm curious to know, like, what is their reaction to some of y'all sharing that that fear of cops?
Personally, with my school, my teachers are white. And I feel like that's a big problem within the CPS board. I feel like they should have more teachers, black and brown teachers, majority of it, but my teachers are white. So within that, they won't understand. And even if I try to help them understand, they can't feel for me. They can only say, wow. Like there's not much to talk about when they don't understand. And the counselors that we have aren't even counselors. They're academic counselors. Like they're the type of people that tell you, oh, what college you want to go to, where are you going to next, what's happening in your future, rather than how's life at home, how are you doing, how do you feel, how's your mental health. No, these are not it. And my administration, like They wouldn't care. Like, honestly, when they found out what that cop did, I mean, I'm pretty sure he's still in this school because they made it seem like I threw myself. They made it seem like it was my fault. They made it seem like I shouldn't have had anything in my locker when I didn't to begin with. I didn't have anything. I don't know how they encountered that rumor, what happened, but I didn't have anything. And when my teacher found out about it, she she tried to understand it. She felt bad for me and she told me like she'll do anything to like to help me, like to make my life a bit easier, but she can't really do much. Like because the next day I'm still gonna see him. I'm still gonna see him all throughout my high school experience. I'm still gonna see him every day after school, in school, in my neighborhoods. Like that same face is still gonna be there. So there's not much to do. And it's like I'm glad that my teacher wanted to be there, but even if she did, like she wouldn't understand.
Yeah, I think like Raina was saying, I think that the priorities within both CPS and like our school administrations, I think the priorities are definitely backwards. I don't think that we put kids and their mental health and their well-being. I don't think that we put those first. And even if like we are in the presence of police officers, like we were saying, I think that trauma continues to follow us and it continues to be present in our lives and present at home and just continuously oppressing us. And I think that our schools don't really realize that. And I think that as well as our schools, CPS, they don't even try to be like, oh, this is what you're going through. Like we hear you, like we're gonna do something about it. There have been times where I've seen like CPS, they're I think the way that they present themselves and demonstrate like what they're doing doesn't truly act or doesn't truly impact us the way that it should. Like there have been like workshops within like schools, and like within CPS schools, or like talking about like reimagining safety. But I think that like they're not really trying. I don't think they're pushing the best that they can to truly listen to students and their priorities and their needs about their well-being, and I don't think they really want to at that.
Talk to me a little bit. It's real. I see it. And listen, quite honestly, this has been going on for far too long. We've talked about the history and just the history of CPD SROs in the schools and how it's actually never worked, or it's never had its intention of producing officer friendlies. It's never done that. And if there are small pockets in places, there are other schools, more affluent schools, now growing, or more whiter schools that enjoy those quote good cops. But those are not, the reflection of what you all see in your school. Talk a little bit about the Cops Out CPS campaign that y'all have been a part of, and sort of where things are right now. Uh, yeah.
So, when people think of like good cops, they think of cops that don't oppress their kids or don't oppress them or their friends. But just because that one cop doesn't oppress you or someone you know doesn't mean they don't oppress somebody else. Like there was one meeting where I went to, Natasha, I'm pretty sure where a woman said, I like the cop in my son's school because it makes me feel safe that a cop is there and he's a good cop. He may be a good cop to your son, he may be a good cop to your daughter, but that doesn't mean that he's a good cop to a black and brown person. Doesn't mean he's a good cop out of school. Doesn't mean he's a good cop inside of school to some other students. Now, when we think of ACAB, we say all cops are bastardized. They're bastardized for working for a corrupt system, a system that was never made for black and brown people. And when you're choosing to work with corrupt people, you're corrupt yourself because you know what the system is going through. You know what the system is made of. You know what this land is made of, and you still willingly choose to work for a department that covers the murders within there. And that in itself doesn't make you a good cop. maybe out of that uniform, you could be a good person, but never a good cop.
Yeah, and I think that kind of talking about that good cop and bad cop kind of aspect and that whole conversation, I think that that's kind of a whole point of like the Cops Out of CPS campaign. Because when we talk about like abolition and kind of like abolishing police, because police are so present in our communities, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, it has to come from different levels. So I think that the whole Cops Out of CPS campaign definitely focuses on the kind of just getting cops out of school completely, out of CPS schools. And that's basically all that we focus on. That's basically what we want. Nothing less, nothing more. Because focusing on kind of that direct point of abolition it is super important, especially because we're talking about the endangerment of Black and Brown kids and Black and Brown youth. And that's like a direct aspect that we definitely need to be talking about, because not only like we've been saying, not only are these cops in our communities, but these cops are in our schools. You send these cops to our schools, where our friends are, where our neighbors are, where our siblings are. I have siblings who go to Jules Elementary School, and they have cops in their schools. My siblings are 5, 6, and 8, and they have cops in their schools. And I think that it's definitely experience driven, because this is what we're seeing every single day. This is what we live. This is what we breathe. This is what we see from not only ourselves, but our friends and our neighbors and the ones that we love. And I think that this is what this entire movement kind of focuses on, because we all are going through the same thing. We're going through the same experiences with the same cops, with the same system, with the same school system and the same policing system. And I think that that's definitely what we're huge and like focusing on right now.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Well, you guys are really impressive. Thank you so much for your testimony. You're really on point. You're hitting all the bullet points, and I'm really impressed by your ability to speak, to give testimony to this. And you're right. I mean, I just want to add. Add. You're absolutely right that the system isn't designed for Black and Brown people. And you're right that it has grown from a slavery tradition. We used to have slaves, now we have employees. It's basically the same system. And the same people that were slave catchers back then are cops now. It's a system that goes on and on and on. And it's a system of white supremacy. And one of the things that's important, for white people, I think, to acknowledge and to think about is that white supremacy is a class collaborationist movement. That a lot of the times what we see, in mainstream politics with Trump and with Biden and all this nonsense, is that what's happening is that the poor whites that are left out of the economy are doing the bidding. They want to say Blue Lives Matter. They want to work with the cops. They say we need the cops. Well, it's a class collaborationist movement, working in the interests of the rich and the wealthy, and that's why we're stuck in this horrible system. We have to stop that. We have to create more class consciousness and awareness, and begin to listen to people like you, because this is it. You're the leaders of the movement, and you will be for the next several decades. So, I mean, that's really all I have to say about that. Natasha, where are we at?
I think it's, it's so important for folks who, may not, one of the things that I think was really important that I wanted, the youth to really take up space and let this be like more of a listening session, as they, shared, their experience, because we really need to rally behind our young folks who are telling us how this system oppresses them. And remember that, if you've come into school at least since the 60s, you know what that feels like and what that looks like. And so I think this is an opportunity. I know it's a real priority for our Chicago chapter, is to really immerse ourselves in the grassroots, not to take up space or to be in the front, which is what veterans are very accustomed to. But in this space, we're following the youth. We want to support them when they say cops out of Chicago public schools now. And hope that, you know, as veterans that are across the chapter, we have someone that's in here from England that's listening. We know a lot of folks watch this live after, you know, we're watch the webinar after we're live. So I'm hoping that folks take away what you heard the young people say, and how you can engage with Police Free Schools campaign and movement across the map, whether you are in Washington State, California, Texas, Florida, Maryland, New York, Philadelphia. There's a DC, you name the city, is basically what I'm saying, across the map. And also Canada. I think y'all are organizing with young folks in Canada as well, is to say that this system isn't working. The Police Out of Schools campaign is really what the young people have said. So however you can hit yourself as you have capacity to be a part of that, support the young people. Go to those city council meetings, write a letter to your mayor, your alderperson, your congressperson. Do the research. You'll be hard pressed to find 2 pieces of articles, I'll give you 2, that say that cops in schools work. But what you will find is overwhelming research and data that says that this system has been broken for a very long time and we've largely ignored it. So I know that VFP believes in the connection that we see between the military 1033 program. Chicago Police Department looks like any special operations military unit prepared for battle. And so when these young folks here in Chicago are talking about that, and in DC, and out in LA and Oakland, we have to believe them. So no more can we have doubt. There's plenty of research. So I'm hoping that folks ask a lot of questions, get engaged with the young folks on the ground and ask them, how can you support? Most usually they'll give you a short to-do list, which is to, you know, let them, to not let them, but to fall back and follow their leadership. But then there are some things that you can do, and I just named a couple of them. Everybody has a school board meeting once a month in your city. Sign up to speak publicly and talk about police-free schools, you know, and how you can support. Again, I defer to what the young people will ask you to do, but a lot of these things are light lifts as we, you know, this is an opportunity for us to seek the peace at home. Peace at home arm of our peace at home and peace abroad mantra as veterans. So I'm hopeful that for everyone on here who might not quite understand, there's a lot of research to get smart. And we dropped a link in the chat from Chicago. The youth have their own youth-led website that they've created to you know, impress upon decision makers that they're aware of it. It's copsoutcps.com. It's in the chat. I urge you to look at the data. These young folks did FOIA requests, and the data is very clear that cops don't make them safe, nor have they for I'll argue ever. So that's like my, you know, why I'm super, super excited to hear y'all talk, and that this is actually a call to action for folks, not just here in Chicago, but across the map, to get engaged with this police-free schools. If you actually search the hashtag on social media, you'll probably find a campaign that's happening in your city. I want to give the floor to Raina and Caitlin to really take us out today of the live and just share like some final thoughts, some final words, and what's on your heart. And again, I appreciate y'all for being here with us today and making us smarter.
I want to go back to what Mike said about I think it was preparing for battle. I kind of like really thought about that because like when the George Floyd protests began to happen, when it was there, they sent an army towards us, towards the protesters, when the George Floyd protest was happening, the army came and got involved with the protesters. But when white supremacists were hitting the Capitol, police were letting them. They were holding their hand while they were walking down the stairs. They were letting them. When white people say back the blue or blue lives matter, they don't really mean blue lives matter, because they were in the Capitol openly disobeying the law while yelling blue lives matter and waving a blue lives flag, yet openly disobeying the law and disobeying the police force. They never meant blue lives matter. They just simply meant anti-black, anti-brown, anti-people of color. Because if you openly disobey the law while screaming that you need to enforce the law into these black and brown youth, you need to enforce the law into these black and brown communities, yet go behind your back and disobey that same law, you don't really mean back the blue. You don't really mean blue lives matter. You just simply mean anti-black, anti-brown, and anti-people of color.
Yeah, definitely. I think that another thing that we should be realizing and acknowledging at that is that these are things that all of us as black and brown people, especially black and brown youth, these are things that we are all feeling. We live these day-to-day experiences. We have to go through this. And not only that, not only are we fighting for these certain things and getting these police out of these schools, but after that, we're kids, we're students. We have to go home, eat dinner, play with our friends, like hang out with our friends. And I think that it's super important because a lot of people like to kind of take those experiences away from our kids. But this is what we're going through. These are the experiences. And not only at that, it's like people aren't acknowledging that. People aren't acknowledging that black and brown youth, we are kids. We have to live these day-to-day experiences. We have to go through these things. And not only that, but like my personal experiences with just people, ignorant people, like Raina was saying, like people with like back the blue and all of that, they don't mean that. They didn't mean blue lives matter. What they meant was that black and brown lives just don't matter. That's what they meant. I think this whole like blue lives matter and what we've been seeing the past year has never been about one specific thing. Because if you think about it, like none of these kind of movements that support these police officers, none of these are about anything but anti-blackness and anti-brownness. And I think that when youth is talking about this and when we're kind of bringing this up in conversations, I think it's important to take us seriously because we are speaking from experiences. I have had mass texts sent out from me about me from like officer dads, CPD officers who are dads in my neighborhood who have sent mass texts out about me, Facebook posts. I've had texts coming to my phone telling me that this is not how we do things or how like what I'm doing is wrong. And speaking from my truth and speaking from the truth of my people and youth and my friends and the people within my communities, I know that that will never be wrong because we have continuously seen this not only through our experiences, but the same experiences that our ancestors went 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago. So I think that this continuation of this system that continues to act like a mutation and just implements it in different forms, you can't ignore that. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that and acknowledge that this is exactly what we're talking about.
That's it. As y'all say, period. I appreciate y'all for being on. It is always, like I say, every time, it is so good to be in community. Every time we're on together or in workshops and just, organizing and strategizing, I learned something else. Y'all are clear in your message. I don't need to tell you that. You know that. I think that this I wouldn't even call it podcast, this webinar has been one of my personal favorites because this is, again, how we've been saying for so long that we want to use this platform to hear from folks on the ground and how we can, sort of organize. So police-free schools, no matter what city you're in, get engaged, get involved, follow the young folks. Mike, any final closing thought?
You all said it all. I just want to say thank you. This was a lot of fun. It's really pleased to meet you ladies, and keep doing it. Keep going. Be bold. Be charismatic, and it'll pay dividends.
Thanks, y'all, for joining us. Again, if you are on active duty, if you're in the National Guard, we really want to be in community with y'all. Like, we know when you see and hear these stories that you know what it is. We've talked about this in the past, that we have so many veterans who experience, you know, the conflicts while they're still in uniform. So we've set up this peer support, whether you're in the Air Force, Navy, Army, Marines, Coast Guard, we have a peer that will support you. So hit us up on our email. We'll contact you, and all of our conversation will be in confidence. None of us are free until we're all free. We have nothing to lose but our chains, and to a more just and peaceful world. Thank you, Raina. Thank you, Catlin. Peace. We'll see y'all here next Wednesday.